The names are listed. The titles are official. The positions 6th and 7th in line are publicly documented, quietly accepted, and displayed for the world to see. Everything looks complete. Everything looks settled. And yet, right at the center of it all, there's a silence so precise, so consistent, it refuses to go unnoticed. Because behind the announcements, behind the polished statements, behind the carefully managed appearances, there is one question no one inside the palace has ever fully answered. Where is the independent verification that confirms every detail exactly as presented?
On Archie. I mean, that was a shocking lie to have told, which was instant.
The description she does of the Portland hospital, the birth, that was completely fabricated. We all know.
Put on her Instagram feed earlier this week with Archie in the garden. What did you...
That silence didn't start recently. It started at the very beginning. Royal births for generations have followed a strict, almost ceremonial pattern of formal notice signed and confirmed by medical professionals placed publicly where it could be seen, questioned, and trusted. Not optional, not symbolic. A process designed to remove doubt before it could ever begin. And for decades, it worked without deviation. Until suddenly, it didn't. When the announcement arrived, it looked different. Not dramatically at first glance, but different enough for those familiar with royal protocol to pause. Instead of the traditional framed notice verified through established channels, the information came through a more modern route, delivered directly by the couple's own communication team. Faster, perhaps, more controlled, but also missing something that had always been there before independent confirmation.
I'm very excited to announce that Meghan and myself had a baby boy early this morning.
At the time, many dismissed it as evolution, a monarchy adapting to a digital world. But look closer, and the details begin to shift. Information that had always been standard precise timing, exact location, full medical context appeared either delayed, softened, or absent altogether. Small gaps, easy to overlook individually. But patterns don't rely on single moments, they rely on repetition. And once you notice the first gap, the others become harder to ignore.
Would be milking Archie for all he is worth. Archie, right?
Then came something far more unexpected. Not from critics, not from tabloids, but from within. A personal account published voluntarily intended to tell a story from the inside. And yet, when that story was placed side by side with the official version already on record, something didn't align. Not loosely, not interpretively. Specifically, details about timing, location, sequence, events described in a way that felt real, personal, emotional, but when compared against the previously released timeline, the pieces didn't fully match. And here's where it becomes difficult to ignore. When two versions of the same moment exist in public record, both cannot be entirely accurate at the same time. No clarification followed, no adjustment, no correction. The words remained as printed, the official record remained as stated, and the space between them stayed exactly where it was unaddressed. That gap might have remained just another unanswered detail if not for what surfaced next. Documentation, the one form of evidence that, by design, is meant to eliminate ambiguity completely. A birth certificate is not narrative. It is not interpretation. It is a legal record. Fixed, defined, foundational, and yet, even here, questions began to form. Differences appeared. Amendments were made, quietly, without detailed public explanation. Now, corrections on legal documents are not unheard of. Clerical mistakes happen, but they typically leave a clear trail explaining why they occurred, especially when the document belongs to someone connected to a constitutional institution.
Was behind her updated moniker on the official document, which omitted her first and middle names from the original version.
But in this case, the changes raised more questions than they resolved. Not dramatic on their own, but again, patterns don't rely on single anomalies, they build through accumulation. And by now, the accumulation was becoming difficult to dismiss. Then something even more unusual happened. The conversation didn't stay outside, it moved closer in. Statements began emerging not from anonymous sources, not from distant observers, but from individuals connected by family ties. People who, in most cases, would be expected to protect the narrative, not complicate it.
Yeah, he said the same thing. I don't believe, and he doesn't believe, that there are kids, because
what they said wasn't identical, but it shared a common thread, details that didn't fully align with the public version of events. And what made those statements stand out wasn't just their content, it was the response they received, or more precisely, the lack of one.
Who knows? But you look like you're medically induced on all your videos You look.
No direct denial, no legal challenge, no formal correction addressing specific claims. In an environment where public figures routinely respond swiftly to protect their image, that absence becomes part of the story itself, because silence in certain contexts doesn't close a question, it extends it. And as each piece settles into place, the altered format, the conflicting timelines, the amended records, the unchallenged statements, it begins to form something larger. Not proof, not conclusion, but a pattern, a sequence of moments that taken together raise a question that still hasn't been clearly answered, not loudly, not directly, but persistently. And the more you look at it, the harder it becomes to ignore. And just when it begins to feel like this is still a matter of interpretation, the conversation shifts into something far more serious. Because beyond the optics, beyond the statements, beyond the contradictions, there is a legal framework that does not bend to narrative. It doesn't adjust for public perception. It doesn't soften for reputation. It simply defines what is and what is not valid under the law. Within that framework, one principle stands: unchallenged, the legal identity of a child at birth is determined by specific documented criteria, not assumptions, not intentions, not public declarations. And when those criteria are not followed exactly, the consequences don't remain personal, they become structural, especially when the individuals involved are connected to an institution built entirely on verified lineage. That's where the stakes quietly change, because what may appear to be a series of unrelated inconsistencies suddenly becomes something else entirely, a question of process. And once a process is questioned, every step that followed it comes under the same light. Now, consider the position of the institution itself. Once a name is placed within the official line, once titles are confirmed, once recognition is publicly granted, those actions carry weight, not symbolic weight, legal weight, institutional weight. They become endorsements, silent but powerful, and reversing them later is not as simple as issuing a statement. It would require acknowledging that something may have been accepted without full clarity, and that creates a problem no institution willingly invites, because correcting a mistake is one thing, admitting uncertainty in something so fundamental is another. It raises questions not just about the moment in question, but about the system that allowed it to happen. Was everything verified as required, or was it accepted under circumstances that were never fully examined? Neither answer is comfortable, and that discomfort has consequences, which brings the focus to the one individual who, more than anyone else, has the ability to bring clarity yet has chosen not to. Because the reality is simple: if complete certainty existed, confirmation could be obtained quietly, quickly, and without spectacle. It would not require public confrontation, it would not require media attention, it would simply require action, and yet that action has never visibly taken place, not publicly, not formally, not even indirectly through clarification. Instead, what exists is a carefully maintained middle ground. No rejection, no full validation, just continued recognition without deeper explanation. A position that from the outside appears less like resolution and more like management. And management by its nature is not about answering questions, it's about controlling their impact. By this stage, many arrive at the same conclusion: it should be simple to resolve. A single test, a definitive answer, a moment of clarity that closes the discussion permanently. But even that assumption runs directly into reality, because under the law, such a test cannot simply be imposed. Consent is required. Legal grounds must exist. A formal challenge must be initiated within a structured process, and none of those conditions currently exist in a way that forces resolution, which means the one answer that appears simplest is, in practice, the least accessible. And whether by design or by circumstance, the situation remains exactly where it has been from the beginning, just beyond the reach of definitive proof. At this point, the conversation stops being about individual moments. It becomes about the pattern itself, the announcement that didn't follow tradition, the timeline that didn't fully align, the documentation that required quiet adjustment, the statements that went unchallenged, the absence of verification where it would have been simplest to provide it. Each element on its own can be explained, interpreted, dismissed, but together they form something harder to ignore. Not a conclusion, not a verdict, but a question that refuses to disappear. Because if everything is exactly as it has been presented, if every detail is correct, if every step was properly followed, if every document reflects reality, then there is one final question that remains. What is the one action that could settle it completely, and why has it never been taken? That is where the silence becomes the loudest part of the story. Not because it proves anything, but because it leaves everything open.